Biden sucks at the job. Biden could very easily get reelected president of the United States of this country unless we make the case and have an agenda and do everything right. You know, that's where my head is with all this, right? Like, yeah, he's terrible. Yeah, the polls show it. Does that mean he's going to lose? Does that mean that they'll actually have to cede power to the other side? I feel like we need to be very sanguine about it. I feel like we have to make sure that we look at it for what it is, not for what we wish it would be.
It is also State of the Union Day, which is going to see Joe Biden head up to Capitol Hill. And I'm curious whether we'll see, remember last year's State of the Union, if I remember correctly, ended with Joe Biden saying, go get him, which everybody was like, what exactly was going on there? And we think it may have been a message to Biden's handlers to go get him up on the dais there speaking, but instead he read it thinking it was a part of his overall speech. So many different moving parts here, but Buck, I wanted to hit you with this, which just came down from CBS. CBS, not exactly renowned for being biased in favor of anyone out there who is a Republican. Ask George W. Bush about that. But they asked several questions that, to me, make it really hard for Joe Biden to argue anything other than the state of our union is not very strong. Buck, I'm going to hit you with these. This is as devastating of a numbers as I can remember seeing for a sitting president. Are Biden's policies, this is the question from CBS, are Biden's policies making your own family's finances better or worse? Better, 18%. Worse, 49%. Making political division. Remember, Joe Biden ran on, I'll get everybody back together again. I'm going to be normal. I'm going to end this divisive era that we live in. Are Joe Biden's policies making political division better or worse? Better, 19%. Worse, 50%. And this one, and I'm going to build on this one a little bit more, Buck, because I know you'll love it given your focus on the border. Making illegal immigration better or worse? Better, 21%. Worse, 51%. And let me build on this immigration for you, Buck. They then broke it down by everybody's parties out there. Do you think the Biden administration should be tougher or easier on immigrants trying to cross at the border? Tougher, 54%. Easier, 20%. Buck, Democrats by 10 points think that Biden should be tougher at the border. Not surprisingly, the GOP 83-11 says tougher. Independent voters 53-23 tougher. White 61-19. Black 40-21. Hispanic 44-25. As bad as Joe Biden's policies are, he has managed to unite the entire country in believing that he is awful on many things, but that the worst single thing that Joe Biden is doing in his presidency right now is handling the border. I just thought, even from CBS, these were pretty staggering numbers that came out today.
And here we are watching as the preparations for the State of the Union address tonight, Clay, for this regime includes re-erecting the big black fence around the grounds of the Capitol. Do you see this? They're actually doing this.
I saw that this morning. Yeah.
They're setting up the anti-riot fencing around the Capitol because of the insurrection. They're really doing this. And as much as people of reasonable minds and emotional stability can see this and understand the pathetic theatrics that it is comprised of, I think, unfortunately, we look at all this data, we look at how people feel about the economy, and then we see them preparing for the siege of what's going on at the Capitol State of the Union address tonight, which is going to be boring. You and I will watch it. I do not recommend that everybody else. I'll tell everybody, don't waste your time watching the State of the Union address. Clay and I will watch it, and we will tell you whatever is interesting about it tomorrow. It is not worth I was going to say watch football instead, but I guess there's only one game left in football because I know about that one. Thank you,
Yeah,
Clay.
Super Bowl is coming.
Yeah.
Do you know who's playing?
Yeah.
Do you remember?
The Kansas City Chiefs and another very good team.
I'm actually impressed you got one of the two, the Eagles.
Thank
Apologies,
you.
Fly Eagle Fly fans out there.
My beloved Eagles, the majestic bird, of course. So here we are, though, watching all this unfold with the Biden administration, and it feels a bit like there must be either some plan or some reality that we're not necessarily taking note of, because all these polls indicate a regime that is floundering. But we did not see a Democrat Party that got its butt kicked like all the polls were showing in the midterm election. And so I'm also now, I'm more skeptical of polls now than honestly I have ever been. I was skeptical after what happened in 2016, obviously, but that was a happy skepticism, like, oh, look at them, they were wrong. This time around, it proved that people can get it wrong. The pollsters will get it wrong in both directions. That was one of the lessons learned. And it just feels to me like for all of the idiocy and the incompetence of the Biden administration and the hysteria they surround themselves with, well, they're erecting anti-riot fencing around the Capitol. You know, get a grip, libs. Were there any riots after the last election? Just calm down. But, you know, they're nefarious and they're ruthless and they're organized and they move as a collective. And so I just don't want us to underestimate them because, yeah, Biden sucks at the job. Biden could very easily get reelected president of the United States of this country unless we make the case and have an agenda and do everything right. You know, that's where my head is with all this, right? Like, yeah, he's terrible. Yeah, the polls show it. Does that mean he's going to lose? Does that mean that they'll actually have to cede power to the other side? I feel like we need to be very sanguine about it. I feel like we have to make sure that we look at it for what it is, not for what we wish it would be based upon the truth of the economy and the truth of the border. How much worse could the border be, Clay? Could it be worse? Honestly.
No, I don't think it could be worse. And, I mean, this is effectively the start of Joe Biden's reelection campaign, the State of the Union, right? Because he's going to make his case for 2023. There are already reports that he's going to call, for instance, for a billionaire's tax. There will be several things that he puts in the State of the Union that he knows have absolutely no chance of passing because he wants that to be the message coming out for 2023 as we roll into 2024. And so I don't think there's any doubt at all, barring a major health-related setback, that Democrats are all in on Joe Biden. And I think we talked about this some, but I'm surprised it hasn't gotten more attention. The fact that they remade the order of the primary season for 2024 so that South Carolina is first, which is Joe Biden's most reliable of all the locations. Remember, he did awful in Iowa. He did awful in New Hampshire. And so they've recast the DNC has the overall primaries for the Democrats to basically ensure that even if Joe Biden were to get a challenger, he would be able to snuff out that challenger very quickly. Now, maybe somebody still is going to run against him. I saw where Marianne Williamson, you remember her, the sort of new agey guru, for lack of a better way to describe her. She ran a couple of years ago, and it sounds like she may run again. We've talked about the idea of Eric Adams, but a lot of the legitimate big-time contenders have dropped out of this race. And so it now looks like they basically cleared the decks for Joe Biden. And barring a major health issue, Joe Biden is going to be the nominee in 2024. And so this is his beginning stage to make the case that he is the best to take us into the next 4 years. And because I think effectively, and Buck, you agree with this by and large, we're in a gridlocked era that chances of anything substantial coming out in 23 or 24 are very low.
Yeah. I think
so
that
that's where we are.
You know, we're in a political trench warfare and we're trying to fight over 100 yards of territory. But unlike in trench warfare, whoever gets that 100 yards of territory gets to actually call the shots for 4 years, right? So it matters a whole lot, but the margins are very small. we're on a razor's edge for what will determine the political and with it the rest of the future of this country. I think that's very meaningful for us all to understand. So I'm hopeful that the right will not only be effective in producing. I mean, what is our health care program? I mean, these are things. Do you hear anyone even talking about that right now, Clay? I mean, I can't remember the last time I heard a politician on the right, any Republican, any conservative, anybody, speak meaningfully about health care. In all the polling, that's one of the biggest concerns for people. Look, I'm glad that Kevin McCarthy is saying Social Security and Medicare cuts are off the table right now, because anything other than that is just electoral suicide, right? I mean, if you want to lose, start saying, well, let's just deal with Medicare right now. That's a terrible idea. But we are entering a presidential election cycle. I know it seems crazy because we just had our midterm election, but we had said this all along. And I just think that we need to see not only a program that is that is putting America first for the Republican Party, that is conducive and is compelling to people in the middle, but also that we understand where the Democrats were able to, with a weak economy and with a stumbling, bumbling buffoon as the president, to avoid a midterm wipeout. I mean, we have to be very steely-eyed about that as we look at all the polls and everything else. Because I think, do you agree with this? I think we're going into a kind of a meh economy right now. I don't see it. And who knows, right? I mean, if you want predictions that are wrong, go look back at most major economists. I think it's probably going to just be kind of okay. But if it's just okay, then it turns into, what does that last 1 or 2% decide when they're in the election site? What does that last 1 or 2% of the electorate think about when they're actually pulling the lever?
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think it's going to be blah. But, Joe Biden's going to go out and say, well, we've got 14 million new jobs or whatever the heck it is. Again, new jobs being defined mostly as people who already had the jobs that they weren't allowed to have because blue states were shut down. And so, look, to me, the Democrat line is set. There's not going to be a lot of drama barring a health scare, in my opinion, from Joe Biden. They're going to run him. I think it's crazy, but they're going to run him. He's the best option. All of the drama is going to come in the next year out of the Republican side of the equation, because I believe whoever Republicans pick will beat Joe Biden. I really do in 2024. The question is, by how much, and to what degree are we all sitting up at 2:30 in the morning waiting to see what a few people in Scranton, Pennsylvania decided to do in the election? I would like to. This is my book, Buck. I want to win a landslide. I want to be able at 9 o'clock to, start having drinks and not have to worry about whether the fire alarm is going to come on in Fulton County outside of Atlanta, in Atlanta, and whether we're going to have ballots come pouring in at 3 a.m. that change the outcome in Wisconsin. I want it to be outside the margin of error. But that's going to be the choice that Republicans have to make in 2023. Who is the guy or the girl who is going to beat Joe Biden? Because that's going to be the matchup on the Democrat side.
What are the facts? What is the state of the union right now? Because we're going to hear it's great tonight.
It's not great. I mean, people are worried. Every breakfast, people used to have eggs and think it was no big deal, just some protein. Now it's almost a specialty because the price is so high. I mean, they're worried about the fuel. They're worried about their jobs as they go. They see inflation time after again. And then when you look at the latest polling, they're worried about their government. So this is the moment, and this is the discussion I had with the president. It shouldn't be that they're worried about the government, their number one issue.
So that's Kevin McCarthy talking about the State of the Union. There was that poll that said that people are very concerned about government. Also really stunning, Clay, is 64% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck. 82% of middle-income households say that they are now cutting into savings dramatically. I think household savings for middle-income earners, I should check this, but I'm pretty sure, in the last year have dropped dramatically across the board. I mean, I want to say it's gone from like $2 trillion to $1 trillion or something. I mean, there's been an enormous amount of expenditure of savings that has gone on for middle-income households over the last year. I'll check the numbers on that. Please don't quote me on that. But it's apparent that the State of the Union is not strong, but it is also apparent that the Biden administration plan, and the speech, is it out already? People are saying the speech has leaked in advance.
Yeah, the speech has evidently leaked. So we know many of the things that Biden is going to talk about tonight at 9 Eastern. And one of the things that I think is going to be so dishonest, there's going to be a lot of massaging of numbers. And Buck, I'll mention one. The amount of credit card debt has skyrocketed that Americans are holding now. That is a sign, obviously, as credit card balance debt increases, that many people are doing what you just referenced, that is living paycheck to paycheck, sometimes just paying the interest on those credit card debts. But when you look at what Biden is arguing, and Kamala Harris has been saying it, KJP, who we just played on The View a little bit earlier in the show, is saying it, they are saying that wages are up. And this is important because it is true that wages are up. But wages are up while the overall cost of living due to inflation has gone up more than wages. So you can't argue wages are up, and I'll just give you a simple one here. If wages are up, for instance, 4%, a lot of you out there might be saying, well, 4% raise not really going to change your life one way or the other. Okay, but if your wages are up 4% and inflation is 2%, the overall quality of your living would have increased because you would have exceeded the rate of inflation. When wages are up 4%, which is what the White House is bragging about, and simultaneously, Buck, we are living in, inflation got all the way up to 9%. Right now it's at 6.5%, I believe. Your overall family's quality of living has declined because your wages have not kept pace with inflation. So if you're out there saying, boy, eggs are expensive, and they are, one big reason why is because they're not only more expensive in real dollars, they're more expensive in inflation dollars. And all of these things add up in a big way, which is why we started off the show saying, Buck, and I think it's worth hammering home again and again, the numbers are really bad when it comes to overall inflation and people's quality of living.
This New York Times article, listen, when Democrats want to kill each other, they have the New York Times on speed dial number 1. And what this article is every ambitious Democrat, they're looking at Joe Biden. I'm here to tell you, Joe Biden's not going to run in 24. I do not believe he will be the Democrat nominee in 24. And I think all the ambitious Democrats are measuring the drapes. And I think you're looking at people like Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren and Gavin Newsom, who all see Kamala Harris in their way. And you're right, Hillary is seething with jealousy. And so these knives are coming from every direction, and she's certainly given them a lot to work with.
Paging our friend Senator Ted Cruz here. He coming out strongly there on the side of Biden is not going to be the 2024 nominee. I don't see it. So I don't know if Senator Cruz wants to put a stake bet on this one, or maybe a game of 1v1 on the basketball court, although I guess that wouldn't really be a bet. I don't see it. And Clay has come around to my thinking. I feel like if they were to have anybody other than Biden step in at this stage, it would be giving up the power of the incumbency, which is substantial. And they, perhaps even more importantly, it doesn't seem that they have a good second option to run. Because that's the same people that are writing the New York Times that Joe Biden is not doing well, think that Kamala is a total disaster. So I think that's important for people to understand here, that Kamala is not the pick of the elites in the media and the establishment anymore. So I don't know. Senator Cruz, we heard you on that one. You think that it won't be Biden? I think it still will be Biden. I might have to end up eating some humble pie on this one, but I just don't see it. You know what? I'm going to put up a Twitter poll, too, on this one just to see where a lot of my followers are. I'm always curious about that one. I can't imagine that it would be anybody other than Joe Biden at this point, given the realities of who else could possibly be involved. If he had a really strong VP, absolutely. A really strong VP that was polling well, that would be the obvious choice. But Kamala Harris, I think it is clear to Democrats Kamala Harris would lose to Trump, to DeSantis. I think Kamala Harris would lose to Youngkin or Nikki Haley. I just don't think she can win, and I think they know that. And that to me means that it's just going to be Biden. He's got the name recognition. He's got the power of being in office right now. And a lot of Democrats, I think, unfortunately, have become very comfortable with having a figurehead presidency, which is Joe Biden just kind of doddering around and no real vision, no nothing. But there are so many people involved that the Democrat machinery is so dense with different leftist activists and policy manipulators of different kinds that they think it doesn't matter whether the president can even tie his own shoes. It doesn't matter if the president has any real ability. All that matters is, can you have a Democrat in office? Can you get a Democrat elected? And then have the machinery do the rest. So it's just about finding some way for whomever the occupant of the Oval Office in 2024 will be, finding some way that that person is a Democrat. And then beyond that, it doesn't really matter. So to them, electability as a means to power is the entire game. The skills of the individual, the leadership qualities, that's all irrelevant. And that's why tonight, going into this State of the Union address, you're going to see that Joe Biden will be rewriting history in real time. He'll be saying things that you know to be untrue. And at some level, I think Democrats like Biden take glee in lying to your face because it's a means of demeaning your sense of what's really going on. It's meant to disorient you. It's meant to make you feel like, wait a second, that's crazy. Did he really just say that? And you know that the Democrat media is going to go along with all of it. They're going to support him. They're going to prop him up. They're going to tell you that he's done a great job and that he's exceeded. I can assure you of this. There'll be a lot of Biden has exceeded expectations, exceeded them. When for all the rest of us, it's, wait, isn't this the guy who talked about the winter of death and forced people to get shots by the millions that they didn't want, that didn't work anyway, and that subjected them to risks that they weren't even allowed to talk about? Isn't that the great uniter, Joe Biden? Some of us remember what the promises were and also what the reality was for the last 2 years. But it's going to be funhouse mirror time. It's going to be distortions and lies and nonsense tonight at the State of the Union.